So Bruce and I left Mission Hills, where the hospital was, where I got the mammogram, and we were running a couple errands before we went into Palmdale, and I kept thinking about Mom. At the time, I wished more than anything that she could be there with me, but I realized that I'm glad she wasn't, because she's up there helping me. And I would hate to have her see me this way. Okay, so now I know I have to have a biopsy. I have an appointment for the next day to have the surgery, and I'm talking to Mom every time Bruce leaves the car, and it hits me that I should be calling Steve Buckman, that I should be making that call right now, and I did, and he wasn't in the office. I mean, it took me like 8 people to get just to his assistant, to his secretary, but once I got there, then he called me, and I missed his call like 2 or 3 times, and we just didn't gel. But by the end of the day, we spoke. And Steven said that he would prefer that I have a surgeon do my biopsy than a radiologist. And he gave me a name and a number of the head of the UCLA Ronald Reagan Breast Center, which is Dr. Chang. And he said, I doubt that she'll work with you, but she'll recommend doctors to the surgeon to take the biopsy and to work with you and everything, and just try and see if you can get a full professor to work on you, and as things has it, because I'm such a lucky girl, and I'm so blessed that Dr. Chang took my case herself, and I got to work with her directly, and oh my gosh, she was amazing. I remember that first appointment with her. I went in with my friend Lori from back east. She'd flown in to Cali, and when we were passing through Palm Springs from Arizona to go to that appointment the next morning, well, it wasn't the next morning after the mammograms, the next morning from when we were driving, I called her up just to see if she had arrived yet, and she had. So we stopped there, and we ended up spending the evening with her, and then she came with us to UCLA, and she sat in with Dr. Chang and myself, and this was my whole outlook on what went down. Um, excuse me. And Dr. Chang said that if there is any cancer at all, that she's going to request that I have the broken gene test done, and which we did. And she also wanted me to start with the three tests. The biopsy, a CT scan on my chest, and a CT scan on my throat, and which I did, and I had the biopsy out there, and then I came back to Arizona after waiting 5 days to find out that I only have to take a test and wait another 2 days before I can have the CT scan. So at that point, I was very tired, very frustrated, and very broke. And so we came back after 7 or 8 days on this third or fourth trip into LA. And you know what? They say that that the one thing that can break anyone is a catastrophic disease, and they broke me quick. I was so lost. I felt so lost because I wanted the best care, but it just seemed like everything was so expensive to drive out there like 5 or 6 times. Each time we're there like 5 to 10 days. And the hotels are like $100 a night, and that's not including food and gas and the stress of what's going on. And so I was pretty beat up at that time, and it was tough. It was very tough. So I decided to go back to Arizona and to do the rest of my tests there, and so I did, and that bit me in the ass too a little bit, but I got them done, and after all the tests were done, Dr. Chang says, "Okay, let's talk about the reconstruction," and she said that I can have the mastectomy and the reconstruction in the same day, on the same day, in the same operating room. You know, I mean, like while I was still asleep, it would all be done together. And I said, "Is that what you recommend?" And she said, "Well, first of all, I was like looking at your chart, and you say that you've been smoking for 45 years. That leads me to believe that the tissue, that the tissue underneath is going to be very thin, and it wouldn't be the optimal condition to build a new breast on." So she recommended that I wait a year, and I took that advice from her. She said that it was my decision to make whether to have a single or double mastectomy. You know, that was the most adult decision I ever had to make in my life, and everybody kept telling me the same thing, that it was a decision I had to make on my own, that no one else could make it for me. I didn't like the sound of that, because most of the decisions that I make on my own are not good, or they hadn't been good in the past. So anyway, I took my time on making that decision. It was like still like the second week in March, and I just had a few tests I had to do. I had to get the CT scans and the biopsy, and that was it. And so I went and I got all those tests done, and I put off making a decision. And what Dr. Chang did was she reserved the operating room, or she would reserve the operating room as if it was a double mastectomy, and if I decided on a single, that wouldn't be a problem. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with Sherry, and she always has that wonderful disclaimer of not really being a doctor or having, the or wanting to tell me what to do. It wasn't her place, she said. And she was right. It wasn't her place, and but everybody has opinions, and that's all I really wanted to hear was their opinion and why they felt that way. And out of everybody, my dad was the one who answered that question most fully. What and why? And this is how he put it. I'll never forget it my whole life. he said, I want you to consider something. I want you to consider going with a single mastectomy, and I'll tell you why. Because then you still got one booby to play with. Everybody else was telling me to go with the double because I shouldn't have to go through this again. But after I spoke with the doctor and found out that HER2 positive cancer had a cure, not just a treatment, but a cure, that I would never get that kind of cancer again. I wouldn't be getting it in my other breast. But then people said to me, well, they're not going to be even. They're not going to look the same. It'll always remind you of the cancer. And, you know, I don't think that that was enough to make me want to go with the double mastectomy, and I decided on the single. Because I do like to play with it. No, I don't. I did it because I thought that the healing would be quicker and easier. They were already telling me that it would take a year for me to get full motion back in my arm because of the removal of the lymph nodes. And that was a very important part of the surgery, was knowing if the lymph nodes were affected, because the lymph nodes are like it's like a superhighway to your entire body, and once it gets in there, it can go anywhere. So, the first date for my surgery was April 16th. And when I hung up the phone, I cried. Because I didn't want Richard. I didn't want Richard's birthday to be the day that I got it, because, if anything happened, it would be awful if anything happened on his birthday to me. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm 98% positive, but I still have that 2%, always in the back of my mind. And because if I ignore that 2%, then I'd be in shock, I wouldn't be prepared. And so I called up Richard, and I told him, and I broke down on the phone. And he said to me that, hang on, I'm going to blow my nose again, hold on. He said to me, I would love for you to have it on my birthday, because it'd be like your rebirth, like you're starting over again, and we could celebrate together every year on my birthday. And I didn't believe him. I know I wouldn't feel that way if Richard had cancer and his surgery was on my birthday. And if anything happened to him, I would just be miserable every year on my birthday. And anyway, I couldn't get it done that day anyway, because my tests from Arizona didn't make it to LA in time, which, like I said, that ended up biting me in the ass a little bit too. But I got a second date for the 25th of April, and that would be the day I had my surgery, the 25th. It was at UCLA. Hospitals are so different today than they used to be. I went in the morning of the 25th to the hospital, and I checked myself in, and they sent me for some tests. The first test was like a CT scan, and that was fine. And then they sent me for mapping. They call it mapping. What it is they put some radiation. They put it in my neck, and then they waited like an hour or 2 hours for the radiation to take hold, and it makes the lymph nodes glow, and they map the route of the lymph nodes so that the doctor knows where they're at, and she can get it. And I remember when Dr. Chang says, we're gonna try and get about 3 or 4 lymph nodes. I usually shoot for 3, and 99% of the time I get it. If in the case of the 1%, if I don't, I recommend that we have another surgery. But like I said, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna get it, no problem. And I went to sleep, and when I woke up, it was all over. I was wrapped up, bandaged up, and Bruce was there. And he didn't listen to the nurses. You have to go get her medicine and take care of these few things while she's sleeping. And he didn't. And they yelled at him for it. And they made him leave the hospital to get all the things done that he was supposed to get done, so that when I left at 8 o'clock in the next morning, that I had everything I needed, and I did. So I checked in at my surgery was at 11 o'clock on the 25th, and I was in the car on my way to my brother's house at 8 o'clock on the 26th. So they didn't really keep me there, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty major operation, a mastectomy, just to, wake up and not be groggy and go to the bathroom and say, okay, now you're done, go home. And it scared me, because I never had surgery before, and when I did open my eyes and the after surgery nurse was there, oh my gosh, she was amazing. Just like everybody else that had touched my case, this nurse was amazing. And she talked to me, and she answered my questions, and she gave me good drugs. So I was in no pain at all, and she told me to take it as prescribed. And Richard did the same thing, I did the same thing, and even Dad did the same thing, that we all didn't take the medicine the way it was prescribed because maybe we were afraid of getting addicted to it, or that we were doing it too much, and so we might have had an easier time in our healing. But I don't know how you could have an easier time. I mean, I had no problem healing. Richard had no problem healing. I mean, we both had pain, a little bit. Richard had a lot more than me. I think, I know, from his knee replacement, and my dad, I'm sure, also, than I had from my mastectomy, but pain is not always just physical. And that's what Richard told me. Pain is not just physical, that between the operation, between that and the chemotherapy, that he knew that I had quite a little journey ahead of me, and he let it be known that he was proud of me, and I let him know. I called him when he got out of surgery. I was the first to know because I had been talking to the operator at the hospital, and he called me to let me know exactly when he was out. So he knew before the doctors told anybody. I knew what room he was in and that he was out, and I talked to him first, and I told him that I was proud of him, that he didn't chicken out, because I know a lot of people that have that surgery scheduled don't actually make it because of the amount of pain it is. And I was a little pissed off at that too, because, you know, if he didn't do his knee surgery, that would have been a great excuse for me not to do mine. But he didn't give me that excuse. So I was really proud of Richard. He came through with flying colors, and right after that, I went in, and then when I got to Richard's house, he had a hospital bed downstairs because he couldn't walk upstairs, and I was in Molly's room upstairs, and within 24 hours after I had gotten back from the hospital, we were both sitting on the couch, talking, laughing, and we were okay. Neither of us were so totally affected by the surgery that it interfered with our emotions. And that was big for me. I remember on the fourth day after the surgery, which was the last day that I stayed at Richard's house, I was under the impression that not only was, because they had these two drainage things to catch the drainage, I was under the impression that not only was the nurse, because I had an in-home nurse come to empty the drainage, but I was under the impression they were going to change a bandage, and that would be the very first time I would have seen the scar from the mastectomy, and just wasn't ready yet. And because I have such a great God, they sent a male nurse, and they gave me the perfect excuse to say, hey, Bruce and I are not comfortable. I wanted Bruce there with me the first time I saw it, and I didn't want a man to be the one to take the bandages off. And so we left him on, and actually we weren't supposed to take him off at that point anyway. I found out later, but I learned a lot when I was at my brother's house, and I want to share those things with you, and that's where I'll leave it on this chapter. What I learned was what I believed my brother wasn't real. What I believed my brother felt about me wasn't real either. And to the core, it rocked me what I learned about my brother. And that's that he loves me. That he knows that it's just him and me. He's got his kids. But his kids aren't his sister. His kids don't love him the way I do. And I will always love him that way. I always have. I just never thought that he loved me. But he does. And every minute that we spent together was amazing. It was calm. It was loving. It was helpful. It was like nothing I expected. And that alone made everything I'm going through, even today, worthwhile. So, like I've said before, the cancer took a lot from me. It took my naivety. It took my left breast. It took my sense of being immortal. But I got a lot more back. I got relationships with people, the most important people to me. And it had been too many years since I had that. And so, in retrospect, if someone would say I could live without getting that cancer, but my relationship with my dad, with my aunt, with my brother, with myself, and with Bruce, it would stay the same, I would choose to take the cancer again. In a heartbeat. So the surgery is done, and now I need to go and find a medical oncologist, and that'll be my next date. Sorry I get so emotional, guys, but it's a pretty emotional thing, And I'm just trying to be real and honest, and I love you all. I'll speak to you soon.